Of part 5, I am particularly proud. Yep. Alright. Oh my god. Everything was messed up. Took me fucking 5 hours. At least, I got life at least. Oh, Mumi has one tab open instead of a million. Yeah, deleted my tabs. My tabs are gone. I guess that's good for you guys. But now I have 2 different browsers. So, you know, I don't know if it's better or not. Oh. Alright. Enough of me. F-tabs. This is the Pontius 40k Lord, the BADAP WAR, Part 4, finale! The aftermath of a bloody civil war. Your RAM is free. No RAM is free in this world, sadly. And I looked up when we researched my setup. We looked up how much I could sell my RAM for. Abonnenten. Oh, because it's German. Ja, ich rede Deutsch! Anyway. Before I completely begin, I'm gonna fix my blanket that I use because cold. Because I make myself into a burrito. At this point, Pontius the Inquisitor has already received a confession, and it's now just enjoying the screams. I mean, is it wrong? And also, hold on. I'll show that later, I guess. But yeah, I have proof that I'm better at understanding storylines than certain lore tubers. Anyway, let's go. Oh god.
Pio, come out of the basement. Today we finished the BADAP WAR series.
What? It was today.
Yes, it is today. People are waiting for the series to be completed from the first episode.
Damn it, I must have gotten the days mixed up. Bolivar, today we can't invade Venezuela. I need to finish a video. Bolivar, we already talked about this. I don't speak Spanish. Jeffrey, do me a favor. Close the door because he won't stop screaming in Spanish for hours.
No problem.
Seems my invasion of Venezuela was postponed to Monday.
Huh. Hold on. Watch the last 2. You're gonna be done in like minimum. Oh, Mumi has 1 tab open. Only 2 browsers. At one point I had 4? Damn. And yes, you were reusing all of them?
Though my sentries may slip and my ships may rest at anchor, our foes know full well the big guns never tire.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Who was that quote from exactly?
It's Euron. The man suffers an extreme
Oh.
lack of good quotes for being a better character than Abaddon.
We are finally at the end. I can scarcely believe it.
For the last time in this series, I suggest before watching this video to go and watch the first 3 parts, as we covered the entire war
No, Pontius, we're
But
not
yes,
watching
today we
again.
finally finished the lore-accurate retelling of the entirety of the BADAP War. And first we will finish with the last few main events of the war, and then we will talk of the aftermath and what happened to all parties involved. Our story resumes in 895, 913, and 41. In the aftermath of the death of BADAP Primaris, the remaining Astral Claws, Executioners, Mantis Warriors, and Lamenters were put on trial before a specially convened consistorial court of their peers, with their very existence at stake. Despite the attempts of Legate Inquisitor Freyne to have the matter placed fully under Inquisitorial remit, a conclave of 5 Space Marine chapter masters, whose forces were not part of the conflict,
Hello,
were
Zach.
convened in judgment in accordance with Astartes tradition. Representatives of those that fought on both sides went on to give evidence to the court. Particularly noteworthy was the testimony of Captain Mirsan of the Salamanders, speaking out in eloquent and moving defense of the Executioner's chapter honor, if not their actions.
The Salamanders are always the best bros, even when they are your enemy.
You forgot they use flamers as their primary weapon while they are your enemy?
Okay, almost always the best bros when they are your
They
enemy.
are the best
Also heard
bros!
at length was the now near-dead master of the Fire Oaks, Stybor Lazarek, and his bitter calls to eradicate the vanquished foe without exception garnered some sympathy from the tribunal.
The asshole deserved it.
The last to testify was Legate Inquisitor Jarndyce Freyne himself, whose impassioned and wise words called on the assembled chapter master to weigh both the deeds of man and the will of the Emperor, and heed the judgment of history on them. Now, I think it is the best moment to have a little segment about something that I consider not even mentioning in the video. The short story The Trial of the Mantis Warriors, written by none other than our local crazy person C.S. Goto. This short story is awful. Fuck, there is no other way to define it. This short story fucking sucks. And CS Goto once again confirms that Games Workshop has no screening process to hire decent writers. Jesus Christ. Removing that it is boring as hell, it commits the worst sin a writer of Games Workshop and Black Library can ever commit. It doesn't respect the lore. Not even a bit. Want some examples? Because I read this pile of excrements made short novel for this video, because of my self-imposed duty to check all the sources of everything I talk about on the channel, to deliver only the most exact lore I can. And I can show you how much CS Goto, official 40k writer, didn't read the lore of the BADAP War to write this travesty. First thing, in the book, during the trial, the chapter master of the Mantis Warriors, that didn't have one during the war, as after the death of Yarvan Sartak at the betrayal at Griff, they had been led by Hazra Red, that was their chief librarian, named Khoisan Neotera, recalls how the Mantis Warriors had faced defeat at the end of the Star Phantoms, when by lore of the Imperial Armor books, the Mantis Warriors surrendered shortly before the Great War Council of 519, 912, and 41, after being decimated by the Carcharodon's campaign in the Endymion cluster, and half a year before the Star Phantoms joined the war. The very same short story implies that the Mantis Warriors fought during the siege of Badab Primaris on the side of Euron at Badab. Once again, impossible. They surrendered before the assault and were cut off from Badab long before that. With the book even repeatedly calling the planet the wrong way, because the official name is Badab Primaris, but the short story keeps referring to it as Badab Prime. It also implies that the Nova Marines were fighting on Badab against the Euron and the Mantis Warriors. The Nova
Making that mistake like once in a novel is just, you could call it a typo, right? But keeping, keep referring to it in the wrong name as a, writer is, isn't that one of the great sins? This is just sad, bro.
Marines exited the Badab War between 908 and 909 M41, a full 3 years before the final siege of Badab, in an Imperium-wide strategic redeployment. It is so far back in the story, in fact, that it is explained in part 2 of the series, not even the part before this one. The short story also makes a lot of mistakes and assumptions on a number of things. First thing, the Mantis Warriors are more than once referred to as the Mantis Legion. I don't know what the fuck that means, but being that the writer is CS Goto, I doubt even he knows what a chapter is and thinks they are called legions. It also explains that the executioners fled from the war to their homeworld to defend it against an oncoming Imperial assault, when in the lore they have simply
they have surrendered, and they made like the deal of never coming back there again to take up arms, right?
surrendered with the help of Pellasmir, son of the Salamanders, after the events of the Red Hour, in which they turned fully against Euron and the Astral Claws. To then surrender honorably, with only part of the chapter going back to their homeworld awaiting judgment. And their leader, the High Chaplain Tulsa Cain, his Honor Guard and the Night Hag battleship were taken into custody on Nocturne, homeworld of the Salamanders, where they remained until the end of the war amicably. This is all explained in part 3 of this same series, with precise dates and events. The Carcharons are not even nominated once in the entire fucking short story, and they are the main reason the Mantis warriors were almost annihilated in the first place. Nor are they even mentioned as fighting on BADAP Primaris by testimony of all the parties involved. What? And let's not even speak about the fact that the entire short story reads like a Twilight fanfiction, with exaggerated personal descriptions of everyone involved. It seems almost a sexual fantasy of the writer.
Damn, for real? The chapter master of the Mantis Warriors wore no shackles. Nobody feared that he would attempt to escape his fate. Under one arm he held his helmet, so that his long black hair cascaded freely down his back. The tendrils of his elaborate tattoos could be seen reaching around his neck, and his pale blue eyes glimmered aquamarine in the spotlight. Yes, I can confirm that it reads like a weird fanfiction.
And I have tried to find an explanation to what the fuck this short story is even trying to add to the story of the war. And I found people saying that it came out before the BADAP War Codices, Imperial Armor Volume 9 and 10, so CSGO had no lore to base his retelling of events, and had to make it up in his own way. When just by checking the release date of Imperial Armor Volume 9 and 10, you find out they both came out by 2011, and Trial of the Mantis Warriors came out in 2016. The original lore coming out a full 5 years before this novel, and CSGO simply did not bother to research them before writing this short story.
Angry Italian is gonna get angry.
Ma chi cazzo l'ho assunto a scrivere libri di Warhammer 40.000 a questo? Hanno un mapper responsabile delle risorse umane alla Black Library. Ho visto Game Masters di campagne di D&D a gratis. Fare più ricerche di questo cane di uno scrittore che è stato pagato per scrivere questa merda. A zappare te ne devi andare, non a scrivere libri per Warhammer 40.000, porco dio!
Alright, hold on, I wanna do the thing again.
Ma chi cazzo?
What if I hired this guy to write Warhammer 40k books? Wer zum Fick hat diesen Typen angestellt, Warhammer 40k books zu machen?
L'ho assunto a scrivere libri di Warhammer 40.000 a questo. Hanno un Muppet.
Muppet as chief of HR at Black Library? What is HR in German? Sozialamt? Huh. Alright. Haben die Puppen beim Sozialamt oder was? Bei den schwarzen... fuck. Bei der schwarzen Bücherei.
Responsabile delle risorse umane alla Black Library. Ho visto Game Master.
I've seen Game Masters of D&D do more research for free compared to this dog of a writer that was paid to write this shit. Ich hab bessere Dungeon Master gesehen, wo mehr geresearched haben für ihre Free Campaigns als sonst, als dieser scheiß Schreiber für der bezahlt wird. My Italian is crap. I only caught like every fifth word of that rant.
Di campagne di D&D a gratis. Fare più ricerche di questo cane di uno scrittore che è stato...
Wait. Gratis. Is gratis also free in Italian? I guess it do sound a bit like it. In Italian. It's in Italian, right? Gratis is in Italian. It's in German as well. That's why I was confused. It's been ages since I've heard either angry Italian or angry German. What a good day to wake up on a Sunday. Welcome.
Pagato per scrivere questa merda! A zappare te ne devi andare, non a scrivere libri per Warhammer.
You should have chosen a career as a farmer, not as a writer for Warhammer 40k books. Last part left untranslated. Alright. Du hättest lieber ein Farmer werden sollen als ein Schreiber für die Warhammer 40k Bücher! Du ekelhafter scheiß Bastard, Missgeburt, Hurensohn! Alright, there we go. I just put in my favorite insults at the end. Because I can't translate one to one.
40.000, porco Dio!
Alright, let's go.
Counting the short story as non-canon, because it isn't. We know that a judgment was
Also, that kind of felt good to leave some steam. Oops. Mother. Oh. There we go. My German is better than my Italian, so thanks. You're welcome. We educate sometimes too.
Counting the short story as non-canon, because it isn't.
Oh,
We know
hold
that
on,
the
hold on,
judgment
hold on.
was passed by unanimous verdict.
And we're back.
Confirming the astral clause as traitors most foul, guilty of taking up arms against the Imperium and deceitfully causing their brethren to do likewise. The consistorial court also found all of those chapters who had taken part in the BADAP secession guilty in breaking with both the Codex and the ancient covenant it represented. In
Damn.
punishment, all surviving astral clause in Imperial custody were put to the sword, blindfolded and shackled in dishonor. It was further judged that the other surviving secessionist chapters would have to each undertake a 100-year penitent crusade to atone for their transgressions, and must do so without the right to recruit new brethren during this time. Their future survival or destruction was left then in their own hands, and in the grace of the Emperor. Also, it is not specified in the Imperial Armor books, so I will add it myself, but chapters that undertake penitent crusades can subtract themselves from any conflict or call for help they receive petition for, meaning that they can't recruit and have to fight every enemy they find on their path. This will be important later. In addition, the Mantis warriors would henceforth lose all rights to their ancient domains in the Endymion cluster, with their goods and chattels given over to the Firehawks in perpetuity.
Oh,
And likewise,
what?
the Lamenters chapter were condemned to surrender reparations in ships and war gear to the Minotaurs, this in essence being no more than a rubber stamp approval of actions already undertaken. The Executioners chapter, in contrast, were granted a measure of comparable clemency, and their twin chapter worlds were given over in trust to the Salamanders chapter and their own successors, rather than forfeited entirely, to be returned to them should they endure their 100-year act of penance and survive. As for the men and women of the Milestone Zone, caught up in a decade of calamity and bloodshed, their lives now belong to the Administratum. Alongside them were the Adeptus Mechanicus and Inquisition, both of which had their own interests to serve, and all would have their due. 995, 913, and 41. As a bloody prize and in recognition for their efforts in the war's brutal closing act, the badly mauled Star Phantoms chapter were given the somewhat Pyrrhic reward of dominion over the once proud BADAP sector, along with the task of policing its survivors by edict of Legate Inquisitor Freyne. This reward was somewhat of a hollow one, as the Star Phantoms chapter had been reduced to under a third of his former strength by the fighting, and his new domains were little more than a kingdom of ashes. The Star Phantoms, however, long fleet-based after the loss of their former homeworld centuries before, accepted this laurel of victory as their just and deserved reward. Given the peak of the sector's worlds, they chose to bring down their badly damaged battle barge, the Memento Mori, on the surface of the ice moon of Jaga in the Archaea system, which had been all but untouched by the conflict, to serve as the core of their new fortress monastery, and slowly began to rebuild. 997, 913, and 41. With the arrival of a fresh Imperial Navy task force redeployed to be based at Viania and Administratum Auditors emplaced on Sagan, the other Loyalist Space Marine forces, having completed their operations in the Maelstrom Zone, began to depart for their chapter homeworlds and wars afresh. The care of the Maelstrom Zone was now in other hands, and the province of new masters. It was only when the Sword of Ordon, the last of the Loyalist battle barges, was taking leave to depart Viania on the long voyage back to Zabeos Minoris, that news reached the system of the dark fate that had befallen the Tranquility System. Before departing the Maelstrom Zone, the Carcharodon's fleet returned to the Endymion cluster. There, with the agreement of the Firehawks, they struck at the Tranquility System, whose worlds were once the primary recruiting and training grounds of the Mantis Warriors chapter. From these worlds, they harvested an entire generation to renew their own losses, forcing those selected to fight to the death to prove their worth in order to survive in the Carcharodon's brethren. Thus paid in blood, the Carcharodon's fleet departed, the last known sighting of them made by an explorator augury beacon, which marked them taking course through the warp, ascending the galactic plane into the blackness of the outer void once more.
Why did the Flame Falcons get purged and these edgelords of the Firehawks are still around?
They won't be around for long, Pio. And finally, we come to the last official event connected to the BADAP War, 009, 915, and 41. On returning to Oliterra, and with his last act before he renounced his legate in authority, Inquisitor Jarndyce Frayne ordered an edict of obliteration to be carried out under the auspices of the Adeptus Terra in regards to the Astral Claws, the Tiger Claws, and their master Luft Euron. The task therefore began, wiping their accursed names and their sins from the pages of Imperial history. Sanitized and altered versions of the events of the war began to enter the official record, distorting nomenclature and reference as the first stage of eventual total purgation, while an Inquisition-enforced data pogrom to unmake extraneous or morally unworthy facts concerning the BADAP War was conducted. The Eye of the Imperium finally free to move on. But a strange shadow was being casted from the Maelstrom itself. Rumors and suspicions of new enemies emerging from it was becoming more and more evident to Imperial authorities, and their suspicions were as bleak as unfortunately truthful. Luft Euron lived.
5, 113, 927, M41. Attacks from Corsair forces operating in and around the Maelstrom worsened considerably. Although other than the Pale Stars region, the rest of the Maelstrom zone largely, and it appears deliberately, remained unaffected. Vessels and agents sent into the region began to uncover rumors of a powerful new Corsair lord operating within the Maelstrom, leading a warband of crimson-daubed renegade space marines, seeming to owe no allegiance to any prior known faction, and operating with extraordinary ferocity and tactical discipline. The Corsair lord is set to style himself Huron Blackheart. Can it be true? Can the tyrant of Badab yet live, at least in some form, by some foul agency? I have seen too many miracles, both wondrous and nightmarish, to claim it cannot be so. Are we, mankind, then doomed to be always the father of our own torment, the genesis of our own destruction, time and time again? God Emperor, help us. Ever has it been so.
God damn it!
But as promised, we will also expand further as to what happened afterwards to all the main players of the BADAP War, both single characters and factions if needed. Mind though that we will do it only for those that were involved by the end of the war. Those that left before that, you can do research on it yourself.
I thought I was free to go there for a second, then
No.
I'm thrust back into the torment of learning 40k lore against my will.
Don't worry, Pio. For your happiness, we'll start telling the future events starting from your favorite chapter, The Lamenters.
My boys.
Oh
After
no,
the
my
Lamenters were defeated by the
boys!
Minotaurs and imprisoned on an Hulk orbiting one of the moons of Sagan, only 311 battle brothers of their chapter were left alive. As all other surviving chapters on the side of Euron, they were condemned to a 100 years penitent crusade, in which they could not recruit or refute calls for aid in conflicts. Unfortunately, in typical Lamenter's luck, their penitent crusade engagements went unrecorded. Except for one. In the last decade of M41, the Lamenters found themselves on the way of High Fleet Kraken, a splinter fleet of Tyranids, and under terms of their penitent crusade, had to engage it at any cost. The battle was brutal and unrelenting, even if they were aided by other Imperial forces, but in the end, the Lamenters emerged victorious, claiming that they had survived with 3 full battle companies of Marines. Which doesn't make sense, because they can't recruit during a penitent crusade, and they were 311 by the time they departed. But let's not talk about that. I like to think that they were so fed up with their misfortune, they kept recruiting all the same, but that is just my interpretation of events. In 999 and 41, the Lamenters were called to join their brother chapters of the Blood to defend Baal against the Tyranids of High Fleet Leviathan, during what will be known as the Third Tyrannic War. The little trivia took place in the same year as the fall of Cadia, so these 2 events happen at the same time. The Lamenters declined the call, claiming they were too badly depleted, unfit in body and mind to fight against High Fleet Leviathan after having engaged High Fleet Kraken, and still in the period of their penitent crusade. From then, various sightings of Marines bearing the insignia of the Lamenter's heart have been reported, but all Marines that deployed to find them have always returned empty-handed. It is also rumored that their chapter master, Malakin Foros, that was rumored to have perished during the battle against the Minotaurs in the BADAP War, in the explosion of a battle barge in space, had survived, and later rejoined his brothers in their penitent crusade around the galaxy.
My boys suffer, but they don't break.
Then we have the Executioners. Of all the chapters caught up in the secessionist cause, the Executioners were considered the least culpable and tainted, but they too had to undertake a 100 years penitent crusade before returning to their homeworld of Stygia and Aquilon, in which they will fight Chaos Cults and minor Xeno species around the galaxy, fighting even Chaos Traitor Legion's warbands supported by Traitor Titan legions deep within the galactic core. When their penitent crusade ended, the Executioners finally returned home to Stygia and Aquilon, where they found a torchbearer fleet that provided them the technology to make Primaris Marines. Shortly after, they would engage a warband known as Ushmengar, a splinter warband of former Astral Claws that had fallen under the corruption of Vashtor. What happened to Tulsa Cain, the Raimor Turge, that joined them in their penitent crusade, is unfortunately unknown.
The Executioners are true sons of Dorn.
Then we have the Mantis Warriors.
Indeed.
When they were judged and condemned to a 100 years penitent crusade, only 300 battle brothers were left of the chapter, and they were stripped of their ancient domains, chattels and honors, condemned to 100 years of warring alone around the galaxy to pay for their crimes. The chapter's survival unfortunately remained doubtful even in this initial period, and no further info is provided about their engagements around the galaxy. Just some sparse info that around the time of the Dark Imperium novels, after the formation of the Great Rift and still during their penitent crusade, the Mantis Warriors have been unable to recoup their losses, and are slowly being eroded. And no, I'm not counting any of the bullshit explained in the Trial of the Mantis Warriors novel as canon. It is too lore uncompliant to be trusted. Of their official commander during and after the war, not Khoisan Neotera as is from the novel of C.S. Goto, so not canon, but the real commander, Hazra Ret, nobody knows the fate. It is said that he died during the last days of the fighting against the Carcharodons on Tranquility II, but his body was never found.
Unfortunate victims of a megalomaniac like Euron.
And now we move to
German and Italian ranting and swearing about the shitty writers in their native tongue is an hilarious prospect. Oh wait, now we see the fun of him running through the many times Lexicanum fucked up. The Executioners did Fafnir run proud.
the loyalist side,
Indeed.
leaving the last and most dangerous traitor chapter for last. The Firehawks, beloved by all, and especially Pio, at the end of the war were badly depleted in strength, and their own chapter master was wounded near death in an undisclosed engagement. But all of this would amount to nothing, as in 963 and 41, the Firehawks responded to an emergency in the Crow's World system, where an invasion was taking place allegedly by Dark Eldar pirates. The Firehawks attempted a warp jump from the Piraeus system that was 120 light years away from Crow's world. The Raptorus Rex, 5 ships of the line, with a complement of around 800 Space Marines, the greatest strength the chapter had attained since the end of the BADAP War, and around 2,000 other personnel vanished without a trace in the warp after leaving the Piraeus system. In 983 M41, the chapter was officially declared as lost in the warp and assumed destroyed. There are rumors of the chapter and their flagship being sighted fighting in the farthest reaches of the galaxy, but they have remained unconfirmed. There is also rumors that part of the chapter survived the warp jump and renamed themselves the Legion of the Damned. But these rumors are most likely false, as the Legion of the Damned during the fall of Cadia were confirmed as being full warp entities, and they were confirmed as being fallen heroes of the Imperium from various chapters in other books, making them most likely just minor demons of the Emperor.
Good fucking riddance.
Now we have the Red Scorpions. After the ending of the BADAP War, they too had suffered grievous losses. But the High Commander Karab Kuln and the Red Scorpions were awarded the rare and lauded honor of a Vexilia Imperialis by the Ascent of the High Lords of Terra for their role in crushing the uprising, to serve forevermore as a mark of victory and stand as a relic of the chapter. The Red Scorpions departed, and were sighted again at the end of M41, when in 999 M41, a single company arrived at the end of the first year of conflict during the Third War for Armageddon, during the Season of Fire, and awaited the Season of Shadows to commence hostilities in the war zone of Armageddon. Unfortunately for Karab Kuln instead, he was grievously wounded during the campaigns of the Indomitus Crusade, when he fought and slayed the great beast of Sarum. Kuln's remains were returned to the chapter, and he was interred in an ancient Leviathan dreadnought. Karab Kuln is now the only Leviathan dreadnought still known to be in active duty in M42 in any capacity, fighting side by side with his brothers in battle, even if the leadership of the chapter has now unofficially fallen to Kazan Sabius and Sirai Karagon, as the experience of being inside such an ancient and powerful war machine is a torture on Kuln, that can't lead his chapter efficiently anymore.
A bad fate for a marine that fought also during the Siege of Rax.
The Salamanders instead simply departed from the war, their forces less depleted than others by simple virtue of the fact that they had pleaded less marines in the conflict than many others. They would also fight in many other major campaigns, and side by side with the Red Scorpions and many other chapters during the Third War for Armageddon. Pellar's Mirsan surprisingly has survived, and is believed to be alive, as he led the Salamander's demi-company most recently in the Taledus War. But there is conflicting sources for this, as he is also listed to not be the captain of the second company any longer. His place taken by Captain Nekelm, but this might be just usual Black Library certified lack of cohesive narrative.
The Salamanders are still the best bros.
The Sons of
I
Medusa
agree.
instead don't have much info to the direct aftermath of the war. It is known that they took heavy losses in the BADAP War, like all others, and that by M42 they were largely replaced by Primaris Space Marines. It is also known that not one but 3 torchbearer fleets were dispatched to reach them, with larger than average forces of Adeptus Custodes with them, as they knew the war clans of the Sons of Medusa were likely to give problems in accepting the Primaris and the Grey Shield reinforcements. But in the end, after various difficulties, they managed to get one of the war clans to accept the Primaris, the war clans Lachesis. But the ultimate fate of the fleets that found the war clans of Mageara and Atropos remains unknown.
I would have believed blindly they would be frothing from their mouths at the thought of acquiring Eugene Tech, their Iron Ants descendants after all.
The Exorcists instead found their contribution to the BADAP War tarnished by the closing events of the fall of BADAP Primaris, where they were in charge of the blockade of the BADAP system. There, they ended up firing in the confusion of the planet-wide evacuation on some loyalist vessels, destroying them believing they were traitors. But worse still, in the confusion, the vessel containing Armanneus Valtex, the broken body of Luft Euron, and estimated 200 surviving secessionist marines managed to escape, bringing dishonor to the chapter. The chapter will not be demoralized, however, and will be one of the few chapters to fight in the BADAP War, then in the Third War for Armageddon, and at the same time in the 13th Black Crusade, and are still active to this day in the Indomitus Crusade, the chapter fighting against all Chaos forces they can find in their quest to vanish any kind of taint. Of the fate of Silas Alberek, the captain that led the Exorcist forces during the Battle of Piraeus, and that was heavily wounded during the battle against the dreadnought Ancient Claytor, nothing is known past the BADAP War.
This chapter is the one sent when they can't send the Grey Knights in.
The Minotaurs were gravely depleted after the BADAP War. Even with the reparations they got in equipment from the Lamenters, nothing can compare to the loss in warriors they incurred during the war. The Minotaurs withdrew from the Maelstrom Zone in 913 and 41, after the fall of BADAP Primaris, taking with them several former Lamenters warships to replace their own fleet losses. Astropathic records report the chapter heading towards the Segmentum Pacificus when last sighted, likely traveling towards the ongoing wars on the western galactic fringe. The Minotaurs also helped with part of their forces in the retaking of Rain's world during the closing days of M41, and fighting alongside the Red Templars and Grey Knights against the excommunicated Night Reapers chapter. Almost immediately after the conclusion of the campaign against the Night Reapers, the entire chapter deployed in the Orphean War. But despite their efforts, the Orpheus sector would fall, and the Minotaurs were charged with purging it together with Battlefleet Orpheus. Later, this chapter, that is believed to be under direct command of the High Lords of Terra, deployed on Terra following the supposed taint of their gene seed after the opening of the Cicatrix Maledictum, at the hands of the Death Guard Chaos Space Marine Legion. They received the Primaris reinforcements almost immediately, and deployed to Terra to help cleanse it from the Chaos Cults left after the demonic incursion of Khorne on Terra, and the Battle of Lion's Gate against the forces of the Blood God. They were also there to replenish and recover their gene stock, and the Minotaurs arrived on the planet in full chapter strength. The Minotaurs, was later revealed, had been used to bring out the Exarchy into the open, the members of the High Lords of Terra that wanted to stage a coup against Gilliman to retain power. At the orders of the High Lords involved, the Minotaurs were to help in the coup and side with the rebellion of the Exarchy. After the rebel lords were killed by assassins of the Officio Assassinorum, the Minotaurs engaged in battle against the Sisters of Silence and the Custodes, who were protecting the High Lord and Master of the Assassinorum that was siding with Gilliman. However, ultimately they obeyed the decision of one of the loyalist High Lords, Violeta Roskavler, Master of the Administratum, and departed from Terra.
For their sins against my boys, the Lamenters, I cast the highest curse an Italian can ever cast on another living being. The most foul curse ever created by Italians. I curse them to always have pineapple on their pizza.
No!
The Star Phantoms instead.
They're not gonna eat pizza anyway. It's in the fucking Warhammer 40k universe. You're lucky to get corpse starch.
In recognition of their service to the war, were honored by the granting of overlordship of the now ruined worlds of the BADAP sector by the Imperial Legates. And the chapter chose the Ice Moon of Jaga in the Archaea system upon which to found their new fortress monastery. The world remains their home world to this day. Unfortunately, other than their participation in another conflict known as the Scourging of Kerrak, nothing more is known by this point about them or their endeavors.
Can we just all agree to call them Spooky Marines?
And last of the loyalist chapters to account for, we have the Carcharodons Astra. What they did in the aftermath of the war I explained earlier, and after they disappeared in the darkness of the void once again, nothing more is known about them. If not that they defeated a G-Stealer cult on the Shrine World of Piety 5, headed by the Ashen Claws, precise date of M41 unclear, and that they deployed in the Indomitus Crusade of M42, defeating the Word Bearers on the planet of Budor 5, once again precise date unclear. They're also said to have inherited the homeworld of Oteka, that was stripped from the Mantis Warriors. But once again, that is in DC's Goto novel of Trial of the Mantis Warriors, so just ignore it, it is uncanon bullshit.
I have the serious suspicion the Carcharodons have ties to the Black Shield world leaders that fought with the Imperium in the Horus Heresy.
Now, keeping in mind that we know nothing of what happened to Legate Inquisitor Jarndyce Freyne or the system of Angstrom, and Freyne doesn't even have a Lexicanum page for some reason, we have just one person left to talk about. Euron Blackheart and his Red Corsairs. After Euron was wounded in the final battle at the Palace of Thorns, and his remains smuggled away by Armanneus Valtex and whatever was left of his astral claws, Euron teetered between life and death. His body was restored by Lord Apothecary Garreon and Forge Master Armanneus Valtex. He would have not survived had he not made a bargain with the powers of the warp. Upon his restoration to life, more machine than man, and now constantly in excruciating pain from his wounds, he found himself with a demonic familiar dubbed the Amadraya, as part of the bargain he made with the gods of chaos. He renamed himself Euron Blackheart, and renamed what was left of his forces as the Red Corsairs. His Terminator armor unsalvageable, when he was wounded he lost his armor, his weapons, and much of the right side of his body. Now Euron arms himself with a power axe and the Tyrant's Claw, a monstrous bionic power fist with an inbuilt heavy flamer. He can hardly wear helmets because of the mechanical prosthetics he needed after his injuries. The Amadraya instead acts as Euron's familiar, allowing Euron access to certain psychic powers. The creature is also rumored to be able to read thoughts and transmit them to Euron. Thing that helped him to survive many attempts on his life by assassins. Euron will become a full-blown pirate, him and his Red Corsairs remaining a constant threat in the Maelstrom region, attacking Imperial forces and stealing their space vessels to use in his ranks, accepting any kind of reject and traitor marine in his own forces to bolster his numbers with more souls that have shunned the Emperor of Mankind. Over time, Euron would end up leading the largest pirate fleet in the Eastern Imperium of Men, working with many infamous renegades and traitors over time that fought in his arena on his new planet homeworld of New Badab, inside the Maelstrom Warp Storm. The planet was even visited at one point by Warsmith Onsu, an infamous name in the ranks of the Iron Warriors, as he planned to increase his forces by recruiting more on New Badab in preparation of his invasion of Ultramar.
And for who doesn't know it, Honsu is also the guy that created the demon Kulabas. Just an interesting piece of trivia.
After the formation of the Great Rift, Euron drove Typhus of the Death Guard as Warp Storm Fomori engulfed the world of Danasar. Typhus won the duel, but left him alive as a lesson to his might and generosity. By the end of the 41st millennium, Euron had become a major player in the galaxy. Aided by Fate Weaver during the Terran Crusade, Euron's lieutenant Verngar was able to capture Robute Gilliman and his forces during their pilgrimage to Terra. Robute would be freed and escape from the grasp of Verngar with the aid of Cypher, a notorious fallen Archangel. But Verngar would be able to keep the McCragg's honor, the flagship of Robute Gilliman, and brought it back to Verngar would be able to keep the McCragg's honor, a notorious fallen Archangel, and brought it back to New Badab, where Euron scolded him for letting the Primarch escape. To then pursue Verngar when he departed in search of the Ebon Talon, and after acquiring it thanks to a temporary alliance, the two dueled as Verngar attempted to usurp Euron, but Verngar lost and was heavily maimed in the battle. Euron was able to take Ebon Talon from Verngar and use it without falling under its influence. Shortly after these events, Euron would lead the Red Corsairs against the homeworld of the White Scars, the planet of Chogoris, where the Red Corsairs met their defeat. But Euron's forces succeeded in holding many worlds of the Yasan sector, and for a time captured and tortured Jubal Khan, the chapter master of the White Scars. The Red Corsairs are a force to not underestimate. They are so powerful they were even able to ally with Abaddon the Despoiler. And the Despoiler himself gifted Euron Blackheart with the sixth and last of the Blackstone fortresses. But it is rumored that this was not a gift for Alliance, but a gift made to Euron to make him a target of both Loyalist and Chaos forces, as a precautionary measure in case they would ever get close to becoming more powerful than Abaddon and the Black Legion. Currently in M42, the Red Corsairs and Euron have fought in many major battles against the Imperium and fellow renegades. They fought, as mentioned, during the Terran Crusade, the War for Chogoris, the War of Beasts on Vigilus, the Arcs of Omen campaign, as part of a larger host during the Battle of Malak, and are now fighting the Tyranids in the Maelstrom Zone 2, as their battleship scattered after the opening of the Cicatrix Maledictum, coming directly from the portals opened in the territory of Baal during the Third Tyrannic War. With the Cicatrix Maledictum merging with the Warp Storm of the Maelstrom, the Red Corsairs have now been sighted further from the Wretch Dome than ever before. Euron and the Red Corsairs are a growing threat for the Imperium of Men, and the Imperium cannot afford to ignore them much longer if they keep growing and becoming more powerful. And that concludes everything lore related for the video, but we have one last segment left, what I nominated specifically for this video, the Lexicanum Lied Festival.
Oh no, we are going to get sued this time.
Many people have noticed that in part 1, 2 and 3 that we kept the Lexicanum Lied counter to the bare minimum. And that was because we found so many mistakes on Lexicanum that they started distorting the flow and rhythm of the video.
Then I can't go back to prison. Hernandez still hates me from the last time I was there.
And to avoid making the lore videos worse, just to make a list of all mistakes on Lexicanum, we decided to keep just the most jarring ones, and then concentrate all the rest at the end of the series. And in fact, here we are. All the times Lexicanum lied on the BADAP War, and all mistakes we noticed.
I'll go call my lawyer.
Now, keep in mind we will go for all the mistakes we noticed in the order they happened in the timeline of the BADAP War, from our very first video to this final one. So, let's start with all the mistakes we noticed while working on part 1. We will move fast, so keep pace. Firstly, the Lexicanum page of the Death of Cynax, the main event that will push the High Lords to form the Warders of the Maelstrom, is completely empty. And even the page about the entire planet of Cynax is completely empty. The only citation of the Death of Cygnus we could find anywhere on Lexicanum is generally explained with very little details in the page of the Reborn Chaos Space Marine Warband. And it has the wrong fucking date! As the Death of Cygnus happened in 557 and 41, and not 577 and 41. Then, moving to the Mantis Warriors, their wiki says that their chapter master during the BADAP War was Kyo-san Neotera, when not only that chapter master comes once again from the novel of C.S. Goto, so he's not canon. But their chapter master during the BADAP War was Yarvan Sartak, that gets killed in the betrayal at Grief, and from then on, the chief librarian of the chapter, Azra Ret, become their leader for the rest of the war. In no fucking wiki of the Lamenters, both official or Lexicanum, is mentioned their battle cry, Pio!
For those we cherish, we die in glory.
Moving to the first actions of the newly formed Maelstrom Warders, we have the battle at Taskar's Wound, that has a Lexicanum page. That is completely empty. But the battle is mentioned, for some reason, in the page of the Scourge campaign. The Space Hulk that inflicted 300 Battle Brothers of casualties on the Lamenters chapter, and less casualties on all other chapters of the Warders, the renowned Unallowed Heart, is not mentioned on Lexicanum at all. It is mentioned only in the Deutsch version of Lexicanum, and the date on it is wrong, as the date given is 680 M41, when the Unallowed Heart appeared in 681 M41. In the general list of Lexicanum of all known Space Hulks, the Unallowed Heart is not even mentioned at all.
Damn.
No page exists to explain the events that happened around the Unallowed Heart. And no page exists to explain what happened because of it to the planet of Eshunna. The events around the Unallowed Heart or Eshunna are not even mentioned on the page of the Lamenters or the page of Malakin Foros. Rovik Blake, the former chapter master of the Astral Claws and predecessor of Euron, that I already counted in part 1 as a mistake, as he was not mentioned in the notable members of the Astral Claws chapter at all, has no page of Lexicanum in English. He has just one in Deutsch, with a grand total of 14 words. The battle in the asteroid fields orbiting the Star of Hell series is not mentioned anywhere, and it is where Rovik Blake fucking died. And in all of this, Vorg Memburn, the war boss of the Orcs of Hell series, and the one that killed in single combat Rovik Blake, is not mentioned anywhere, not even in the Deutsch wiki of Lexicanum. In the page of the BADAP War, the Crusade of Wrath, in which the Astral Claws pushed the Black Templars into launching a crusade into the Maelstrom, is not even mentioned. And in the page of the Crusade of Wrath itself, instead, they wrote down the wrong date. The crusade happened in 869 and 41, not 888 and 41. And even then, in the page of the Crusade of Wrath, in all of his lengthy glory, only the Black Templars are mentioned, let alone that the Mantis Warriors, Lamenters and Astral Claws charge into the Maelstrom too during the Crusade. They are not important. And to close all the mistakes of the Lexicanum wiki only in the first video we made, the Flesh Hunters of the Howling Gyre, a threat that was plaguing the Imperium from the times of the Age of Apostasy, and that saw Euron and the Astral Claws unleash the Flesh Eater virus of virus bombs inside the carcass vaults of the Foul Abominations, are not mentioned at all. And finally, we can move to the second video in the series. Kartan Satrap Tanit Koenig, none other than the planetary governor that is considered responsible for causing the BADAP War, is not mentioned anywhere in any page once, and obviously is mentioned only in the Deutsch version of Lexicanum. The date of 903 M41, in which the Kartan's agents started spreading propaganda that Euron and the Astral Claws were traitors, thing that offended Euron so much that he decided in the same year to stop paying the tithes to his neighboring sector, announcing it with his articles of Just Secession, is not mentioned anywhere in the wiki of the BADAP War. while the articles of Just Secession instead are mentioned. In the wiki of the Firehawks, there is no mention of their Cold War with the Iron Hands, that ended with the death of a Firehawks commander in single combat against an Iron Hands commander that were chosen to settle the matter once and for all.
Huh.
In the BADAP War, none of the events that led to the almost complete annihilation of the Firehawks are mentioned, while they were pretty much neutralized already by the opening stages of the war, even with the help of the Marines Errant. In the same wiki,
Yeah, the Mantis Warriors kinda got to them, huh?
there is no mention that the Loyalist forces were assembled under Jarndyce Frayne and Lord Commander Verant Ortiz, that they started making preparations on the planet of Josiah Quintus. Hallows Point instead is not mentioned at all in the wiki, only the name of the station built there, known as Vengeance Station, is mentioned. At the end of the wiki, the Hallows Point incursion is mentioned, and the wiki page it brings you to is completely empty. The pages for the planets of Gargatea 3 and Surgrad, two big battlefields during the BADAP War, are completely empty. And to add insult to injury, the entire events that take place during both the battles of Gargatea 3 and Surgrad are explained in the stunning length of 3 lines of text in the official page of the BADAP War. And now we move to the mistakes of the third video. Inquisitor Taria Shard is not mentioned at all in the wiki of the BADAP War even once, and there is no page that mentions her at all, not even in Deutsch. The Battle of Shaprias not only is not mentioned, if not at the end of the page of the BADAP War, and even then, the wiki page it leads you to is completely empty. But the name they use is even wrong, as they call Shaprias as Shaprais. To be honest, that was a problem even in the Imperial Armor Volume 10, as both names are present there. But being that the name Shaprias is used 23 times in Volume 10, and only 4 in the same volume, I am counting this as another mistake of the wiki. Arch Centurion Karnak Commodus is not mentioned once in the entire wiki of the BADAP War. And this is the reason the Red Hour happened and the Executioners, the last allies left to Euron by that point, turned against Euron and the Astral Claws. The Red Hour is not mentioned even once in the entire wiki page of the BADAP War. The entire invasion of Piraeus is not mentioned either in the page, if not at the end of it, and obviously the page it leads you to is completely empty. Vice Admiral Kagawa, the main commander of the Imperial Navy forces in the Void War of the invasion of Piraeus, is not mentioned once in the entire page, nor anywhere else in the entirety of Lexicanum. The duel between Karab Kuln and Luft Euron during the Battle of Crisias Secundus is not mentioned either. Crisias itself is not mentioned at all in the wiki of the BADAP War.
He's saying so many names in a row, I can't keep up.
There is also no mention that the Forge World of Angstrom, by the end of the war, finally allied itself with Loyalist forces. No mention that the Mantis Warriors surrendered in the same period in the middle of 912 and 41 either. No mention to the events that led to the amicable armistice and eventual surrender of the Executioners chapter as a whole of 912 and 41. No mention that during the Battle of BADAP Secundus, Asterion Moloch, the chapter master of the Minotaurs, impaled the Astral Claws chaplain Varna Sabin to the front of his Land Raider transport, as an example to the traitors of the fate that awaited them.
Lexicanum has been caught seriously lacking, and Pontians show no quarter to them for it. Oh, God. You will be shown no quarter.
If not in a page, once again, in Deutsch. There is no mention at all that the planet of BADAP Primaris collapsed due to planetary level calamities caused by the intervention of the Carcharodons. And even one of the people that will save Euron's life after he was wounded, Armaneus Valtex, which is mentioned in combat in the same battle in which Euron is wounded, is not mentioned at all. And finally, we come to the mistakes we found while making the same video you're watching right now. The date of 913 and 41, and the trial of all the renegade chapters that fought for the cause of Euron is not mentioned in the wiki of the BADAP War, nor in the wikis of the Lamenters and Mantis Warriors, nor the Executioners.
Damn.
In the wiki of the Mantis Warriors, it's not mentioned that they were stripped of their worlds during the trial. In the wiki of the Carcharodon's Astra, it is written that they made a deal with the Fire Angels to harvest an entire generation of youth to replenish their numbers. when the Fire Angels left the war exactly because the Carcharodons became involved. And the deal they made was instead with the Fire Hawks, not the Fire Angels.
Wow.
The page of Inquisitor Jarndyce Frame exists, but it's empty for some reason. The events of 927 and 41, in which Imperial authorities in the Maelstrom Zone explain the rise of a new warlord named Euron Blackheart.
Do not look up Wikipedia for your school project. And do not look up the Lexicanum for your Warhammer lore videos.
And his forces of the Red Corsairs, and their suspicion that Euron Blackheart and Luft Euron are the same person, are not mentioned anywhere. In the page of the Lamenters, their refusal in taking part in the Third Tyrannic War on the side of the Chapters of Blood to defend Baal against High Fleet Leviathan is not mentioned, nor are the motivations for the refusal.
God
And finally,
damn.
as the last mistake we noticed on Lexicanum, in the page of The Exorcist, there is no mention of the tainting of the story of their involvement in
If we don't mention the lore doesn't exist.
the war because of friendly fire during the evacuation of Bada Primaris, or the fact they didn't stop Euron and the remnants of his forces from escaping. And this, my friends, was the entire lore-accurate story of the BADAP War, with all myths behind it disbanded, the only shitty book written on it completely obliterated on a canon level, and all mistakes we found on Lexicanum during our research corrected and counted. And now, Pio, you want to know what I think after having worked months behind this war to the point that it was becoming a paranoia of mine?
What?
I think that the entire BADAP War can go fuck itself. Fuck Euron, fuck the Astral Claws, fuck Lexicanum, fuck you, Pio,
Aw.
and especially fuck CS Goto and his shitty non-lore compliant writing. I am out of here. After months of work, I'm taking an holiday. I'm going to Webway Vegas. The rest of you do whatever the fuck you want.
Webway Vegas?
I meant Comora.
Huh.
I have Space Marine 2 in the basement. You guys want to play?
All right.
Sadly, I cannot play Space Marine 2 anymore. I don't know why. But it just doesn't start anymore. Oh my god! Anyway. This was the Pontius. I am finally done. He made enough video after this. That's more kinky Webway Vegas, but he's not wrong. Damn. However, as for what's gonna happen next, ooh, whoops. Anyway, hold on before I talk about that. Leave him a like, subscribe, check him out, and comment, so that we may have more lore videos in the future where he explains stuff to a autistic degree in his beautiful, angry Italian voice. Anyway, this was Pontius. I'm Moomy playing games. Bye-bye.